Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the Central Virginia Regional Housing Pool Partnership meeting together for our Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, 2 p.m. meeting. So welcome everyone. And we're going to jump right in. So the second item rather, are comments from the public. Do we have anyone here from the public who wishes to get comment today? All right. And do we have anyone online who wishes to give comment? We do not. And who we have? I see Mr. Rutherford. Who else do we need to allow to participate electronically today?
There is one other person who will need to, but is not present online yet.
All right, well, we'll get Mr. Rutherford in. So, Mr. Rutherford, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
If you could please state your location and why you're participating electronically today.
This is Jesse Rutherford. I am located at 174 River Road, Faubourg, Virginia. And the reason why I'm here is because my car's broke down. So, if that's an allowable excuse.
As long as the reasons stated, then we don't know. To allow Mr. Rutherford to participate electronically, we will need a motion to that.
Second.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, you're good, Mr. Rutherford, you're in. And then
Thank you.
An aye for the next, if there's another participant, we'll have to stop and look at them. Then moving right along to number 3, which is an action item on our consent agenda. We do have minutes of June 28, 2023. Memo and minutes of July 12, 2023 work session. That will be in developer incentives and the request of our county. And then item C, fiscal year 24 year-to-date financials. I believe I'll go ahead and take each of these items as separate votes because those who were not in attendance of either the June 28 or July 12, you may want to abstain from those votes. All right, so if somebody, first off, any additions, edits, changes to the minutes of June 28? Seeing none, if there is a motion to approve those minutes. I'll make that motion. All right, motion's been made to approve the minutes of June 28, 23. Is there a second?
Okay.
Thank you very much. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. One thing. And we will then move to the memo and minutes of July 12, 2023 work session. Is there a motion to approve that section? I'll do the same, sir.
Sure, Galloway.
Yes.
There was an email communication from Colette. He stating that there was an error in the July 12th list of attendees.
Okay.
She was present at that, so we wanted to make that correction.
We will need to modify. So, Mr. Smith, would you?
I will modify my motion as stated by Luke. That's impressive.
Yeah. Second. All right, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? I wasn't there. 2 abstentions, 3 abstentions. So that would be.
Was that the memo or is that the amended one?
That's the amended minutes of who was in attendance on that meeting. If that was same, so I was abstaining.
I'm gonna see from the July 12th.
Yeah, I think we do the roll too.
We're gonna recall that. So we're going to do a voice vote on each for the memo and minutes of July 12. So if you call the vote there or call the roll.
Mr. Galloway,
Yes.
Mr. Payne,
Abstain.
Ms. Key, Mr. Williams, Ms. Jones, Mr. Rutherford,
I believe I was there.
Ms. McKeel,
Abstain.
Ms. Claire,
Abstain.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Vermont,
Aye.
Ms. Booker, Mr. Powell,
Abstain.
Mr. Park,
Abstain.
You were there, Mr. Burns. No, July. The work session.
According to the minutes. That was the work session. Of the development. It said, yeah.
You had quite a bit to say.
For a long time.
Understood.
Mr. Coleman,
Abstain.
Mr. Hassan, Mr. Rosenzweig, Ms. Sheehy, Mr. Allison, and then we have alternates. Ms. Dreyfus,
Abstain.
Mr. Eaton, here. Ms. Rochford.
Abstain.
Good. You guys got that count, thank you. And then, item C, the fiscal year 24 year-to-date financials. Do we need any review or presentation for this before we? Is in the packet. Nope. But we're, making a motion to accept the fiscal year 24 year-to-date financials.
I will make that motion, sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Thank you all.
Second for clarification, should
Yeah.
I read fiscal year 2023?
No, it's the current.
It's the coming year that we're in, correct?
Thank you.
Fiscal year 24 is the current fiscal year running from July 1 through June 30th next.
Where we're at today.
This is government year.
All right, so, let's see, the first thing I just wanted to bring in, since we've had the last full partnership meeting, you noticed that Ian Baxter is not here with us. He is no longer with the TJPDC and the Regional Housing Partnership. Ian did take a new position at UVA in the School of Architecture at the Institute of Engagement and Negotiation. So we appreciate his service and time that he provided to the partnership and wish him the best at UVA in his new position. And you may see him running around town, like literally running around town. So we can lay that. And we do not see another participant online, so you can move forward there. And Ruth, was there something else we were gonna do is?
Amy,
No, that
this
was
is
going to go to the TGPs.
Are you ready? Yeah.
So we will continue through. So we'll go to number 4, new business. And item A there, the strategic plan implementation. This is bylaws research and recommendations, stakeholder survey, and Neeson's and Saltman. And glad you were able to.
Thank you. Sorry, Mike. I had car trouble. That's why I was
You're
cutting.
right on time as far as we're concerned.
Second person with car trouble.
We were
We're doing good.
I called you, left a voicemail.
I heard it, yes.
Oh.
Patrick.
You know what?
I can pull it up. The survey is not on this computer, so I can.
That's great. Okay. You want to do that?
Yeah,
You wanna get longer? Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry. My name's Amy Nissenson. I know I've met some of you the last time I was here. So I excuse the fact that this is going to be some of the same information you heard before, but I hope that's okay. So just to give you a little context, Nissenson Consulting consists of myself, my colleague, and my colleague Karen LaForge. We have a third colleague who works behind the scenes to help us with survey monkeys and different things. And we've been around for about 15 years. I also run the Mary Morton Parsons Foundation out of Richmond, which gives out money for capital projects. And so very happy to be working with you guys. So I have stepped in after you finished your strategic plan, and I have been doing some research on bylaws. And currently I'm doing some research on membership and whether you should become a formal membership organization or invite your advisory board that you have appointed to, or you have listed who could become more involved, also opening up membership or not opening up membership. So I put together a presentation that talks about the bylaws research and recommendation. And then my goal is I have created 2 surveys with the help of Ruth and Laura G. Yeah. And so we're going to send it to member. Yes, sir. oh, sorry, Laura, we were gonna send it to members and non-members and compile it. It's an anonymous survey, which we'll share with you in a few minutes. And that should hopefully give us some detailed information around who else wants to be involved, if you're covering issues that everybody's involved in. I know there's been some discussion about adding homelessness to your agenda. And so we're going to hopefully answer some of those questions. So I'm going to give you guys a chance after I do this presentation to look at the survey briefly. And also Ruth and her folks have helped compile a list of appropriate people to send the survey to. And so we'll pass that around. And if you guys have other people that we should send it to, or people on the list that are not appropriate, it's all up for discussion. The goal hopefully is for the survey to go out next Monday and stay out until right after Thanksgiving, beginning of December, with a few reminders going out in between. And then my goal is to spend the month of December finishing the survey information and completing the bylaws recommendations. And then hopefully in January, have a presentation to you of what the findings were. That may be a little bit too ambitious, but we're going to shoot for January. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and please feel free to stop me if I'm going too quickly or you have any questions. So I'll give you the background. So basically, this is through a grant from Virginia Housing, as you may know, and the way that Virginia Housing works with their capacity building grants, you have modules that you have to accomplish that go along with your needs. So the first module was around best practices, which we've just finished around the bylaws research and researching other similar organizations throughout the Commonwealth who might be doing similar work to you, might be similarly structured to you, or maybe totally different, but it's something that you want to explore being more like that organization. And then now the second module is to implement those bylaw changes once you've agreed that that's where you want to go or not go. And also to compile this membership survey information so we can make some decisions on the membership survey. So any questions so far? Okay. So I told you about the number one. Basically what I did is I researched a lot of organizations similar to you and not as similar. I basically chose 8 organizations throughout the Commonwealth. 6 served different regions and 2 were statewide. And I asked a lot of questions around makeup of the board, officers, executive committee, committees that are outlined in the bylaws, so the standing or permanent committees, and those may not be, term limits if there were any, number of meetings. And so I put together a bylaws comparison chart, which Ruth can, I think she's already shared, or there's some back there, can share with you. And these are the questions that I asked the organizations, and some, to be honest, I spoke directly to, and some were through email. And, you know, because of, I guess, things going on, I haven't spoken directly to them, but I can go back and do further research if necessary. As of last meeting, I don't think anybody commented that there was more information needed, but I'm happy to still do that. So the things I asked the organizations were, again, besides the first questions, I also asked them number of board members. Do you have an advisory board or a similar council? Your number of organizational members, if it was a membership organization, and only one of the organizations that I researched was the Hampton Roads. In Hampton Roads, they have an organization that is a membership organization. I asked if there was a fee structure or how they were funded. I inquired about membership benefits, an annual operating budget and budget makeup, and if they had any staff or they were staff similar to this partnership with the help of staff from the planning district. So this is the summary of what I found. And again, I outlined it on a chart. And basically the number of board members range from a minimum of 3. Not official, then that was only one organization that didn't have an official board members because the organization didn't have any bylaws since they were considered a coalition. And then the maximum number of bylaws that I found the maximum number of board members that people had was 23. And then the board makeup ranged from less restrictive Example, the Hampton Roads Housing Consortium calls for equal distribution among the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, and also calls for representation from Southside Hampton Roads, Virginia Peninsula, and the remaining director from anywhere in the Hampton Roads area. And some are more restrictive, where they call out people, different like developers or representing specific districts or regional areas. And then some of the organizations had industry residency requirements, some did not. Basically, I'm pointing out the Alliance for Housing Solutions that serves Arlington County and Northern Virginia. They don't have a big restriction on it, but they do in their bylaws call for diverse representation with no work, industry, or resident requirements. So I guess it can be left up to their interpretation. And then typically every one of the organizations, including yours, had a balanced makeup by race, sex, ethnic, and geographic. And a large percentage of the representatives that on these organizations were housing providers, or a few had homeless assist providers. There was also 2 organizations that were serving the entire state. And they wanted as their makeup 51% from housing providers or homeless assist providers. So I also did do a geographic kind of high level of the different organizations I looked at to see what the geographic area they were serving, how many counties they were serving, to try and get a sense of that compared to to your Central Virginia one. So again, this is what I saw in the bylaws. Term limits range from some having 3-year term limits with either 2 or 3 consecutive terms, or some had 2-year terms with 2 consecutive terms. Officers, term limits, and committees. 3 organizations had nominations governance committees as part of their standing committees. Majority of the organizations only had 1-year term limits for officers, as well as holding office until a successor executive committee member is appointed and qualifies. So basically, I interpreted that to mean that you could repeat as an officer until somebody decided to bring in another officer. It was like an unofficial term limit written into the bylaws. And I did go back. Part of my qualifications for taking on this is that there's an organization out of DC called BoardSource, and they are one of the premier organizations that looks at best practices for boards, both nonprofit and for-profit and associations. And so a few years ago, I was trained by them, and I keep up my certification. I do attend their education stuff. I was attending conferences prior to COVID. And so according to BoardSource, which I thought was a best practice, every board should have a governance committee. Committee can add value for strategic recruitment, effective board engagement, and intentional revitalization. So any questions so far, or any shocks for those of you who have not seen this, surprises or questions you want to ask? Okay, we'll keep going then. So the other thing about the bylaws, 3 organizations had leadership or advisory boards. Northern Virginia had a pretty active advisory board that met 6 times a year. The advisory board had no term limits, and they did include representatives and individuals from the makeup of the organization and the area they were serving. And I believe the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance was also a revenue source, because the members of the advisory board or the leadership council give a financial contribution to support the programs and the activities. Virginia Housing Alliance, which is a state organization, serves advisory role. The leadership council serves an advisory role to the board. They have 20 members who serve 1 term limit with no limits on renewal. Housing Forward has 3 board members that can be designated as advisory and non-voting. And then Partnership for Housing Affordability, which is in Richmond, outlines an advisory board made up of public members, but they have not put that into place yet. So the next slides talk about my recommendations, and I I don't know exactly what the process is, but I guess at some point you guys will vote on if you want to make these recommendations or you want to look at them further, explore them further. Is that the procedure, I assume? So again, the number of board members, I recommend that you review the role of your executive committee and the role of your board members as outlined in the bylaws. And I'm suggesting that it might make it feasible for the executive committee to be the primary governing board. Other board members could be transitioned to an advisory board or leadership council, and board members would this would give board members a more active role and serve along the executive and serve the executive committee as advisors. So that was my first recommendation. Yes, sir. So the benefit is that people would be more, and I'm just speaking from a recommendation standpoint, is people would be more willing to, engage on a more active level, I believe. I believe that, it might broaden the topics that you cover, the involvement of other people. I mean, that's why I recommended, I looked at, the other 8, and it seemed in your organization that, it looks like most of the decisions are being made anyway by the executive committee. So I'm not exactly sure when you have these full board meetings, exactly what you're covering here versus your executive committee meeting, because I've only been at one executive committee meeting or 2. So that was the only reason I recommended it. I haven't heard, I haven't put in the survey yet, so I haven't heard from anybody, member or non-member, that they're missing at the table or don't feel comfortable. And so that, what I think and Ruth and I had talked about, is making these recommendations, but waiting till the membership survey and the non-membership survey came out to give more credibility to my recommendations. Okay. The next thing was about your board makeup. So I've heard from a couple people when I did the first meeting in July that you possibly want more citizenship representation, which I do agree with based on what I've heard from other organizations, and that would be from urban and rural, and maybe additionally one of each, whether they would be on your advisory board or on your new structure board, or currently have it as it is made up now. That would be up to how you decide to vote. The other thing is that the health industry point of view, I know that is through UVA, I believe. Am I correct on that? Beg your pardon? Oh, the health district, I'm sorry. So I don't know if it makes sense to rotate that with the free clinic. And would that give a different viewpoint? I'm not sure, but that was one of the things I was thinking about. The next is maybe a general, less restrictive makeup to allow for representation from the community at large. Perhaps also add a member of the Charlottesville Housing Authority or more organizations in the affordable housing space or social service sector. So I don't know if you want to ask any questions. If people are totally opposed to any of these. I mean, this is just one person's recommendation from what I could tell. So, yes, sir.
The question on that. So the recommendation is to add additional spaces, but not necessarily take any away. So essentially, and so can you remind me, based on your comparative, the size of this body relative to other bodies and just growing it further? It does means it's important to have all the representation and
Correct.
all the large, I would imagine, compared to the others.
Right. I think what I was recommending is possibly the executive committee become the board instead of just the executive committee. And then the rest of the people would be advisory or some kind of other, and the advisory board would also, if you decided you wanted extra revenue, could also, I know that a lot of organizations paid revenue up front or paid money up front to join, but I think that would possibly give more, budgetary dollars to do more programs if needed, and maybe hire a different kind of staff if needed. But that was okay.
Another question that came up in the executive committee meeting was related to the second to last bullet, general, less restrictive makeup. And the executive committee talked about the importance of having all of the sectors at the table, and we talked strongly about public, private, nonprofit, citizens all being a part of the board. This recommendation was more specifically along within the sector, not necessarily saying it has to be an architecture or design or builder, but rather making that a more general seat so that it's up to the governance committee and give the governance team a little bit more flexibility in identifying partners.
And one of the other things with a lot of boards that I work with is that they have non-board members on committees. And so some of your advisory board members could serve on committees, not with the voting, aspect, but they could serve on committees to bring additional information to it. And, like I said, I know that in the number of years that you've been doing your work, it's been very successful in getting information out. I know all of these that I've learned about have, are doing that. This just helps to broaden it. And one of the questions that you'll see on the survey is Ruth and Laura Laura Jean had talked about, do you want to add like a homeless perspective in this area? I know that in other areas, I know that, homelessness, hopefully the way to get out of it is to get people to, get into affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. So that may be an opportunity.
I've got a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure I exactly agree with bullet point number 2.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure why you would dilute that membership of the builder industry when it, they all come from different perspectives, whether it's the builder, the developer, or the design group. I just, and they're the ones that at the end of the day provide the housing. So to me, that's short-sighted.
Well, you may be right. And I said, I don't think I was trying to exclude anyone. I'm just trying to make voices heard in different ways. And so, perhaps 2 representatives from that in the industry could be on the board or the new board, and then they could rotate with term limits so that one time for a number of years, these groups get to have their voice, and then another 2 years, the others. But I would assume that that group would meet as a group or at least share ideas with each other so that whoever's on the board would be representative of the whole group and not just bring in their own personal view of what what they do. But it's just a suggestion.
I think that part of it is that I remember having in Mount we have 12 citizen advisory committees. And at the very beginning, they were very prescriptive as to what role you would appoint to. And it started to click with people who wanted to be on that didn't fit the mold of the scripture, which was then working against it, getting people on the committee. But I think like in this instance, if you had a builder, 2 builders and a developer, but if you're having trouble filling the design, you don't want to preclude the second builder just because it's possible. But ideally, you would have all 3 represented, but bullet point 4, if you have a generally less restricted makeup, you could go, well, it's okay to have 2 builders in lieu of if you had somebody that really.
If you can't fill the other.
I also think the model that I'm recommending again, gives more voice to other people. And I know that I do serve on a number of boards and Richmond, and I have served in others. And typically the role of a board member is not to bring your individual perspective to the table. You're typically representing the community or like the organization that you come from on the board. So I would hope that, some of that already is happening. I have no reason to think it's not, but this just makes a different perception.
Like we emphasize with Christine already, I think the greatest strength of this organization is that we have all 4 sectors strong and present. Less strong on the resident side, we always see that repaired. But I think that's the greatest strength, and however we reorganize, I think the reorganization should have that as an overriding goal. The 4 sectors: public, private, not-for-profit, and resident. And that the other goal of the reorganization is to try to broaden the ability to participate. I think if we have those 2 overriding goals, then whether we call people board members or advisory members, we can work through that. I would be very disappointed in not agree the 4 pillars principle on which I think we're going to do. Not
Right, and I think that's a theme with all the organizations that I researched, is they all do have that kind of representation, and that's what does give them credibility and, you know, the voice to speak. So, you know, so I've seen that in every one of the, and you'll see it on the research I did. I think every one of the organizations has some kind of representation, again, whether it's executive committee, leadership committee, board, membership organization. That makes all of these organizations work so well. So the other thing that some of the other recommended changes were term limits. And I know that you have term limits, but they're not really spelled out in your bylaws. And I don't know if that, you know, is a good thing or a bad thing. That's up for you guys to decide. I mean, some people like a very prescriptive bylaw, and some people do not. You know, so I don't know if you want to spell out more specifically in your revised bylaws to include 3-year terms with either 2 or 3 consecutive terms. And then most organizations, usually if they do that, they put in like people would take a year off and then come back, or they could take a year off and come back. So you're not precluding anybody from not doing it. And also, if you went off the board, you could still serve on the advisory board. It's not like you're divorcing yourself from the organization. And then again, Board Source does recommend term limits because, again, they provide a respectful and organized way to separate inactive, ineffective, difficult board members. They allow an organization to engage and foster an expanding base of volunteers. So, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't. Where's the online? It's up there, right?
Mr. Rutherford,
Yes.
you have your hand raised?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I was just gonna touch base, and you know, obviously the drafts, and I wasn't really part of the drafting of this if there was a subcommittee. The only concern that I run into with the perspective of term limits in the partnership, especially for talent specific board members, specifically builders, developers, and whatever those entities may be, designers. It's a small demographic of builders already. The only concern I would have is that we might be limiting ourselves. We might be limiting ourselves on a pool of candidates to participate. So I'm just advocating specifically for those who may have those specific talents. Now, the other question I would have is, would the term limit be related? When you say builder, are we talking the individual or are we talking the company?
I think it would
That's
be,
it.
I think it would be the company in my opinion, but it's up to you guys. If, you know, typically boards go either way. You know, like I'm currently in an organization where you get on because you're, you know, maybe an elected official or you're representing your company, but then there's a you know, a distinct decision made whether if you as an individual can contribute still, or were you as a representative of the company, you know. So I think that's depending on how you want to set it up. You know, and
I'll hold my thoughts for now. That's fine.
you could also set it up very loosely so that you're not locked into one thing and kind of decide, you know. And again, bylaws, from what my interpretation is, should be looked at least every 2 to 3 years. And so if you made some of these changes and then, you know, looked at them again in a year or 2 years, there's no, if they didn't work, you can always go back. So the other recommended change that I was looking at was consider adding a nominating committee as a standing committee. You could also make this as part of the governance committee's charge. And then implement 1-year term limits for officers that finish at the end of the fiscal year. Not saying that they couldn't be renewed, but at least if somebody was not as active, you know, because sometimes when you get on boards or you get into things, I know my life has changed and it becomes hectic. So that way somebody wouldn't be locked in to something, and they could always step away and come back, or if somebody didn't work out like you thought they would, you know, you're not locked in. And then the last thing is, I wouldn't make any change to officers holding office until a successor executive committee member is appointed. I thought that, you know, maybe that's the best way to term or to label what you want to do or name what you want to do. So any questions about the officers' term limits and committees or concerns? Did you? Sunshine, okay. Sorry. So, the other thing is that as far as an advisory board or a leadership council, additional members who are part of the full board could transition to an advisory board or leadership council, would increase the voices that are heard and increase engagement of members. Advisory board or leadership council should be asked to make a financial contribution, which will help support programs and activities. And I didn't put this in, but I know that typically on a board, almost everybody's asked for some kind of financial contribution, whether it comes personally or it comes from the company you represent. So I would encourage, I know that was happening at the beginning when you were formed, but that's typically, kind of how most boards, I know you're not a normal nonprofit board, but that's how most boards are kind of set up that way. Because it gets more buy-in and it shows other people who want to contribute that the board really has their whole self and health is really bought in and has their whole self invested in it. So again, when you have chance to look at this, I didn't hear any feedback, any negative feedback last time, but I'm still okay to go back, if you felt like this was a fair representation of organizations similar and not similar to you, and is there any other specific information that you wanted me to gather that I didn't gather? The interesting thing I think that came out of this also is that I did speak to the two state people, and I can't think of his name right now, but I said, why is there not an organization out there that gets everybody doing this work together once a year or twice a year? And he said that it was in his plan to do that, but he didn't have the opportunity to do it yet. And he asked that I share my research with him after I finished, and I said I would. So that may be, if nothing changes in the bylaws, it still may be a positive that there might be an opportunity for people from these organizations, you guys from these organizations would have an opportunity to interact and share information from, county to county, city to city, region to region. So any other questions, or does any of this surprise anyone? I mean, I'm just curious, like, I know that, when this was put into your strategic plan, did you think of these are the kind of things that would come out, or did you not, did you have anything in mind?
Look down the table and everything
And these are all the things that we talked about.
I think we were expecting to find out, how we were going to be able to add folks to it. Are we going to talk about the surveys?
Yeah, I'm going to give you an overview of the surveys.
With the idea of, do we have the right people
Mhm.
around the table or at the table representing
Correct.
the issue? Yeah, that's what was the central purpose of moving to having a consultant.
Mhm.
The term limits, the advisory council, I think that stuff is could be new. I was not thinking about that. I think we've already wrestled with term limits, and with that, I think that's something to do every couple of years and figure out, like you stated. So,
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, part of the way that Virginia housing structures their capacity building, it's not always fitting with what everybody wants, but they're fairly prescriptive that the first thing a consultant does when they do the capacity building is work with the organization to give them some best practices, whatever that means. And, I think I said this last time, best practices are typically textbook. It doesn't mean that you have to adopt them or you don't have, every organization that I work with has a culture, special culture. And if these things that I recommended are not part of your culture, that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you're not operating with best practices. It means you're operating with what you take away from best practices that fits your culture.
Margaret, I'm sorry, you had something?
I just kind of want to tell you what I took from what you said.
Mhm.
Which is our current executive committee could be board of directors. Our current full membership could be our advisory board, and then we could have even a kind of a bigger group of people that could be members.
Correct.
So, although the executive committee would expand a little bit to include more people in it, and I kind of like that because the advisory committee is like less engagement, but still significant conversation happening there.
Mhm.
And then members who could be just regular people off the street. In theory, right? I mean, there's not gonna be any restriction on who could pay $25 and be a member of the Federal Virginia. If they are interested in it, they might be part of it, right? Or maybe not, I mean, throwing it out there, and that way, there's kind of structures that feed up and down, I think that's probably an interesting idea.
Yeah, thank you. You hit the nail on the head, much more concise than I was able to do, so thank you.
So related to that, going on what Margaret just shared, I would like, when we think about the question of term limits, and I appreciate Justin's comment that there are limited tools in certain sectors of the representation around the table. So obviously in the public sector, when it comes to, board of supervisors and city councilors, there's sort of a natural turnover that happens anyway, theoretically. So we might want to consider looking at term limits through the lens of that each of those sectors has maybe a different typology of term limit relative to that sector. And then the other, I think the opportunity also to consider is the distinction that Margaret made. Maybe there are term limits at the board level that include the transition from executive committee to board. And then there's turnover there as it should be, but then the second tier membership maybe has a different structure and way of looking at term limits to be sure we aren't hamstringing ourselves by having folks roll off and they really need their voice still.
Right, and your advisory board doesn't have to have any term limits either. They could have, they don't have to have the term limits.
And is it possible to say minimum of 1 year and maximum of X number of years? With a recommendation of, trying to think of 3. What I mean? But there's not really a limit on the top end. If there is a limit, like you can only have Mr. Park.
Right.
He's the only one that can do that. We're gonna let him do forever.
Hey, you're locked in.
Right.
And you're gonna-
That's where we can go off after. Right? Something like that.
Yeah, now I know that one of the things that makes your region unique is that you're so spread out geographically. I don't think a lot of the other regions, except maybe Northern Virginia, has widely spread out. I mean, some of the ones I looked at were rural and they don't have a lot. The one that had the 3 people that was only a coalition is extremely rural, and they don't even have officers. Like I think Kim Habershat from Shenandoah, she's like head of the Habitat, but she also, is that her name, Sunshine, I think, or does somebody know? But anyway, that's her name, I think, and she runs the coalition just as and I don't know if they rotate that among the 3 people, but they're the most rural, and then you guys are probably the most spread out geographically.
Well, the one exception of Virginia housing.
Oh, correct. I'm not talking about the state ones. Yeah, I'm talking about sorry, thank you for clarifying. Yes, sir.
Generally speaking, I support the idea of nominating committees. I think to leverage the network of different members of the board to find talent.
What we should do, I mean, obviously, I'm just thinking of time here, so we're gonna have to get moving on to the next topic. But as you ponder and have thoughts, where should we have that sent to? So they're still gaining the feedback, and what is said today has been captured, but if something pops up after the fact, please send that on to Ruth. So that we can capture that as well as we drive toward making final decisions in the start of the year.
Right, and I would suggest that no final decisions be made until we see the results of the survey, because that could make some significant change or bring up a different point.
Yeah, so as kind of part of the founding members of this organization, and just to echo what Greg has said, it would be very disappointing to see if we lose the spirit of the 4 pillars. I think that is what makes this organization function well. In reference to term limits, the thing that pops into my mind is the lack of institutional memory. It's a difficult thing here to get folks to volunteer for that, so we have to be cautious of that. There's staff changes that impact that institutional memory, and that is the only 2 comments that I would say.
Okay.
So the survey.
Okay, so can you bring up the survey, Ruth? I'm sorry. So the survey that you're looking at is just the questions, but we are putting it into a Survey Monkey. And it'll be pretty easy for people to fill out. And also there'll be the star that you see on some of the questions means that they can't go to the next page or next question without answering that. And we didn't label every one of those that way, but we can label more or take away some of the restrictions if somebody doesn't want to answer a question. So I don't know if you can see it or you want me to read, but basically there's a member survey and there is a non-member survey, and the member survey has more questions obviously than the non-member survey. The member survey has 30 questions, but I don't think it takes a person more than 20 minutes to do it. The other thing is I think that, and we'll say this on the survey when we send it out, is typically you have to do it in one sitting. I don't know if we can fix that or not, but I don't think 20 minutes is that long for a person to sit there and do it. And I think sometimes what I have found is that if people go back to the survey after they started it, they never go back if they don't finish it. So that's just something to think about. So how do you want me to do this? Do you want me to just scroll down slowly? I don't want to
Front of them, or want to glance through it. I don't think we need to walk through the survey.
Okay.
But if you have general comments or feedback on it, we can voice it. Same type of thing. You're going to have time. When would be this would be a sooner rather than later thing. If you have comments and
Yeah. We're slated.
Comment I would make is that the non-member survey, obviously the question about are you familiar with the RHP is an important one, but I think it's question 5. Is what services would you like to see the partnership provide? That's actually a question I think should be posed to the members, that I don't know will be included in the member survey.
In the member survey also, yeah, I think it is. Let me see.
That's one member would say, well, what do you mean what's provided and they're doing? That's not throwing that out there.
I think it is included. I'm not sure. I don't want to misspeak.
Not to add that for the first question, but
The main is just like how far you are in the survey.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I apologize.
Here's our progress. Say how far.
Oh, okay. I can ask if she could. Okay. Do you want to also, if that question, I couldn't find it, but it might be implied in here. We can specifically say it specifically, and instead of like implied.
I think so.
Okay, it's not a problem. Okay. And again, when you take a look at it and you give comments back to Ruth, if you could let us know if you think that we shouldn't be restrictive on some of these, or we should, because I just want to make sure that people don't just go through and, not pay attention to what they're doing. So if you put a restriction that they have to fill that out, they'll pay more attention to something before they go to the next section. The other thing is that as far as timing is concerned, we had planned to send it out on the 13th, but if we need to move it up, it's not a problem. So I guess Ruth, depending on how much feedback you get back, you can let us know, because I know this is a holiday weekend for people, and so that may also stop you guys from having the time to look at it right away. We want to give ample time. Okay, so do you want to just talk about the list for a second, and then we're done? Yeah. And if you would take a look at that list, and if there's somebody on there that you think, I tried to coordinate, I did call Sarah Milston and get an idea of, because I know her really well, and I did call her to get a list of who she interviewed for the strategic plan, even though it's been a couple of years, because I don't want to annoy people by getting them to do another survey. So we did take that into account when we did this. But again, if you feel strongly that someone should not be on this list, or that someone is missing from that list, please let us know, because you guys know this area much better than I do. I know enough to be dangerous, but definitely not enough to determine who should get this information and not.
And I would call out, as we have different positions change,
Mm.
So like Anthony is no longer, is moved over to the county, so, you know, if you would have asked me who his replacement, you know, is, I did not know that right off the top of my head, so if you know his position's name, especially to kind of scrutinize the list with that.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to work with you guys again, and again, if something is missing from what I've done, happy to add it, or, you know, if you don't want me to continue on something, I'm happy to not do that either. So,
Thank you very much.
and I'm sorry I was late again.
No, don't worry about that. Like I said, you were right on time.
Talk to you in the next couple of days.
All right, we're going to move to item B. This is the AC 44 Albemarle's comprehensive plan update. We have Ms. Panalopoulos and Mr. Hope. Is in town. Well, good afternoon.
Hello, thank you all for having me this afternoon. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Tori Kenelopoulos. I'm a principal planner with Albemarle County on the long range planning team. So very involved in the county's comprehensive plan update. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to just kind of give everyone a brief overview of the comp plan update, where we are, and then share some feedback that we've heard specifically about housing, and kind of just get the conversation started with, you know, so much technical expertise in the room. And we're happy to come back for future meetings as well, but thought this would be a good chance to get everyone up to speed. And can I advance the slides, or, oh, you have it? I didn't know if it would work. Thanks. So the comprehensive plan is being updated through the AC 44 process, which stands for Albemarle County 2044. So planning out 20 years in the future. And we're guided by the following project goals. So that's to update plan content to incorporate county initiatives and plans since the 2015 comp plan update, including the climate action plan, housing Albemarle, and Project Enable. To ensure that equity is integrated into both the engagement process and plan content, and to improve plan implementation and usability. The current comp plan has over 70 priority actions without a clear ranking or metrics to measure success. Okay, there we go. So the plan's being updated through a 4-phase process. And in the first phase, which is completed, we reviewed the growth management policy, updated the land use build out analysis to estimate remaining capacity for development and redevelopment in the development areas, and developed the AC 44 framework for an equitable and resilient community. In phase 2, which is the current phase, we're updating the plan goals and objectives and using planning toolkits for a deeper dive into coordinated land use and transportation planning. In phase 3, we will update and prioritize action steps, including several big moves to accomplish in the first 5 years of plan implementation. And then in phase 4, we'll hold public hearings for plan adoption. So the updated comp plan will be organized in a similar manner to the current comp plan, with goals, objectives, and action steps for each chapter. The county vision and mission provide overall guidance, and the AC 44 framework connects the chapters and informs updated recommendations. The goals are the future vision we want to achieve. The objectives are the outcomes or targets to help us get there. And the action steps are specific implementation measures. So as we move through phase 2 and into phase 3 next year, we're continuing to build on the work we completed in phase 1, which I'll talk through a little bit more detail about. This includes using the AC 44 framework to guide drafting plan recommendations, which is a vision for a community that is green and resilient, welcoming and equitable, connected and accessible, and thriving and prosperous. It was developed with community, planning commission, and board input, and prioritizes equity and resilience. So it includes a protected and restored natural environment, access to parks and trails, energy efficiency, housing choice, walkable mixed-use communities, multimodal transportation options, and job training and workforce development. Building on the work from phase 1 also includes using the results of the land use build-out analysis as a data set and reference point, especially for land use, housing, and economic development, and then continuing to carry forward the key themes we've heard from community input. So these are some of the key connections to housing that are within the AC 44 framework. And we wanted to highlight housing as a key component of well-being and quality of life for current and future community members, including housing choice, safe and affordable transportation choices, and housing that's affordable to people employed in the county. We also wanted to show that housing is connected to many other plan topics, including transportation, parks, and economic development. The most recent land use build-out analysis or capacity analysis was completed last year. And this is an estimate using a series of assumptions of the theoretical maximum number of additional dwelling units and square footage of non-residential land uses that could be built within the development areas. The build-out uses the future land use designations of properties that were identified as being vacant or likely to redevelop, and creates a potential build-out scenario using the recommended uses, density, and intensity per the future land use designation. And the analysis found that there appears to be sufficient land to accommodate 20 years of estimated growth and demand in the existing development areas when considering the land uses in the comp plan. It assumes that properties go through the rezoning process and are approved for densities and uses that are consistent with the underlying land use. However, achieving full build out is dependent on development on the high end of recommended density and intensity, and constraining factors such as the cost of land, physical site constraints, infrastructure access, and the rezoning process will limit actual build out. Based on the assumptions in the land use build out analysis, about 7% of the development area's land mass is estimated to accommodate new development or redevelopment. Additionally, recent rezoning approvals have tended to be toward the mid-range of recommended densities. This was especially true of properties that were designated urban density residential, which recommends 6 to 34 units an acre with an average approval of about 17.6 units per acre. There we go. So while there appears to be sufficient land to meet housing demands, there are other areas that we want to consider with the comp plan update besides just having land for a sufficient total number of dwelling units. These are some of the other examples of considerations, including encouraging smaller housing units and a variety of housing types. And when we think about housing demand, we may also want to consider how measuring demand has regional implications, as there could be even higher demand from people employed in Albemarle County who cannot afford to reside within the county. So in phase 2, we have 3 steps as we draft goals, objectives, and planning toolkits. In the first step that we completed earlier this year, we asked for community input on challenges, opportunities, and priorities by each plan topic, including housing. In the second step, we asked for community input on what we call planning toolkits for coordinated land use and transportation planning. So these are topics that are in the current comp plan that are important for growth management and coordinated planning, and where additional focused input was needed. These toolkit topics included activity centers in the development areas, factors for potential future development area expansion, crossroads communities in the rural area, and the rural interstate interchanges. So in the first step, we had a questionnaire with quite a significant number of responses. We had several pop-ups. We had a working group meeting with our steering committee, and community chat kits where folks hosted their own meetings to share their responses. And then in the second step for the planning toolkits, we had several open houses, online questionnaires, additional community meetings in a box, and quite a few website visitors as well. So in this third step that we're currently in to share draft goals and objectives, we're gathering community, planning commission, and board input. And to draft goals and objectives, the AC 44 team is working with an interdisciplinary team of county staff across the organization, as well as partner agencies like RWSA, ACSA, VDOT, and the Health Department. We're reviewing the 2015 comp plan to carry forward relevant recommendations and incorporating new best practices. We are also updating recommendations informed by community input, commission and board input, and guided by the AC 44 framework. And for the housing chapter specifically, we are starting with Housing Albemarle, which is the county's housing policy adopted in 2021. This makes it the most recently updated chapter in the comp plan. And additional updates are based on emerging issues, input we're hearing, and consistency across the plan chapters. So to share a little bit about what we've heard to date, we heard that more housing types are needed, including multifamily units, missing middle housing, tiny homes, and ADUs. That aging in place needs to go beyond housing and include transportation, healthcare, and daily needs. More assisted living and senior living communities are needed. A lot of respondents in our questionnaires indicated that they felt like they or someone else they know would need assisted or senior living in the next 10 years. And we've heard a need for senior living communities that are affordable and provide safe spaces for residents to walk and gather. We've also heard, of course, that housing affordability in this area is a top priority and a really significant concern. We've heard residents that are worried that their children will not be able to afford to stay in Albemarle County after they graduate high school if they want to stay. There's also a need for housing that's affordable to people employed in the county. And there's a lot of support for repairing and maintaining existing dwelling units, especially to prevent displacement. We've heard that we should partner regionally to address housing priorities, and that there are not enough new housing options for smaller household sizes, as many new units being built are larger. We've heard that new housing should be primarily built within the existing development areas, and that using the development areas efficiently should be prioritized over potential future development area expansion. This includes building up rather than out and encouraging adaptive reuse and infill. There was interest in reducing restrictions for some site design requirements, such as parking, and streamlining the development process. And we've also heard that housing should be encouraged in designated activity centers and around transit nodes. So this is a summary of the 6 goals that we have for the draft housing chapter. And the full goals and objectives are available on the AC44 website with a questionnaire that we would welcome you all to fill out as well if you're interested, or to share with your networks to fill out. And the goals and objectives will look familiar to those who've had a chance to look at Housing Albemarle. And there are some updated recommendations within the objectives for connecting multimodal activity centers in the development areas, transportation options to support aging in place, and an additional emphasis on energy efficiency. So these are some questions for you all to consider. Happy to take questions or hear feedback. We're really at like the initial kind of policy drafting stage, not getting into action steps yet, but we just want to make sure that we're on track, that we're considering all of the important issues that you all are seeing and dealing with, and seeing how we can continue to collaborate in the future.
That's the question, but also other comments or questions you have. Personally,
Do you have a sense of what you are planning for in terms of population growth over the next 20 years?
I want to say the estimate from Weldon Cooper Center was an additional 31,000 people by 2044 in Albemarle County.
I think recently we've all been growing about 1.4% a year, because if you follow that out with the math at the time.
Question, it was mentioned regional collaboration. I know one of the things we do with Charlottesville very often is we have to improve collaboration and coordination, particularly in the urban ring, right next to Charlottesville. I'm curious if there was any discussion of kind of specific ideas about how to possibly institutionalize better coordination on that issue. I mean, certainly in Charlottesville, we have a lot of work to do on our end to try to improve that. But obviously, the urban ring, between economic growth and socially, for most people, will be indistinguishable from Charlottesville and Albemarle.
Yeah, and on the long range planning team, we've had some talks with some of the city planning staff. We've been mostly focused on the kind of coordinated land use and transportation aspects, but we're happy to continue meeting with them and collaborating as we update our plan.
we haven't got to the board level yet, conversation around that specific question about.
As it relates to buildable area within the current model or the considered model, how
perhaps without getting too in the weeds, are you guys adjusting for water retention ordinances and critical slopes?
We did do kind of an adjustment to assume that, you know, a percentage of the site would not be buildable. And so that includes, you know, leaving space for roads and parking and things like that, but also assuming that some percentage is going to be constrained by environmental features. So we worked with the consultant Kimley Horn, and they came up with an estimate of kind of an amount to reduce that by. And in some of the development areas, they reduced it a little bit further for environmental features, like in Crozet, where there's, you know, more slopes and streams than in some of the more kind of urban ring areas.
Can you approximate your margin of error?
Not sure about the margin of error. But it was, I mean, the results from that land use build out analysis were fairly similar to the one that was done like 2 or 3 years before that, kind of tracking with what had been built. But it is an estimate.
I may have missed it in your discussion around the evaluation of future build out. You talked about there being some parity between anticipated growth and the build out potential. Then you talked about the reality that if you look back over the last few years, and maybe even more than just a few years, probably historically in general, that we don't usually see max build out. Did you come to a conclusion around what the capacity was, in that medium level of build out relative to projected growth?
Yeah, we did a few scenarios. One was like, you know, absolute max. I think one we adjusted for kind of the average that we're seeing, and then one we did for by right zoning instead of land use. And I think even adjusting for, you know, not seeing the maximum density, it's a lot closer. I think there still looks to be enough capacity. It's just a, you know, smaller margin. Zoning was a lot tighter, the by right uses, and then I think, you know, that's part of what we were looking with some of the additional considerations is like, yes, there does appear to be, you know, sufficient space, but also are we getting the housing types that people actually want and need? And then we're going to need, you know, designated affordable units as well.
With a quick follow-up to that, or maybe not quick, a follow-up to that is, you know, obviously you're probably aware of the city's current discussion, evaluation, particularly of existing single-family neighborhoods, and looking at increasing allowable densities in those neighborhoods as part of, you know, our constraint and whatever acres to address our growth on some level, and fundamentally, frankly, to address the historical exclusionary nature of those single-family neighborhoods. Has that been part of the conversation to date at the county level, and in particular thinking about the urban ring and what that looks like for future growth?
Yeah, I don't know that we've gotten quite to that level of detail. I mean, we've heard a lot of interest in ADUs, which are, you know, allowed in some of the county's existing zoning districts already and recommended in a lot of the future land use designations, but we haven't quite gotten to the more detailed discussions of if there's other places they should be allowed. But I think it's something we'd want to ask for input on if there's interest in that.
You know, in the urban ring in particular, how much of that land area is designated currently as single family somewhere or another relative to other zoning categories?
I would have to pull up a zoning map to check, but I would guess a lot of it is probably zoned higher density residential, especially on the like western side of 29.
Like an area of interest.
Mm-hmm.
When you say, like that scenario where in the growth areas, only about half of what theoretically could get built out is built, and you say that's still adequate capacity for population growth. What exactly does that mean? Because I guess I'm not fully understanding that, because you had also mentioned that there was pressure on the supply side, particularly for different housing types.
Yeah, and we looked at the actual like land use build out of how many additional units could be built, and then also added in the development pipeline of how many units are currently approved and not yet built, or under review and also not built. And so like adding all three of those things together, there is, from a just pure number standpoint, enough total dwelling units to meet demand, even accounting for the fact that some of them are going to be approved in the lower to middle end. But that's just a straight, you know, total housing unit count. It's not accounting for like the actual types of units that are getting built. And a lot of times we don't know the actual mix that's going to get built out. We get a lot of rezonings where there's like 3 or 4 types of housing they could do, and we're not sure of the exact mix until they actually build it out.
I guess I'm just confused because I've still, seen regional housing market trends similar to Charlottesville, but with our regional housing market. In all the reports that supply is severely constrained, not just in Charlottesville, but the surrounding area, so I guess I'm just not.
Well, and I guess maybe part of the, well, not to speak for like, builders, but there's all of this capacity that's theoretically there, but then it needs to actually happen. I mean, sometimes we get units that sit in the development pipeline for like 10 to 20 years before they actually get built. So there's a supply, but then whether or not it's actually happening can vary.
Thanks, sir. This is quite an undertaking. Thank you for this. Will the comp plan ultimately make specific recommendations on infrastructure improvements, roadways, sewer, water, schools, etc.?
It's a great question. We'll be getting to the community facilities chapter next. I mean, I think at least at a high level, yes, but I don't know if it'll get down to like the actual, very specific project recommendations.
We talk a lot about density and need for housing, but the other issue is the quality of life that in comp plans are always there.
Yeah, and we've definitely heard, a lot of feedback, not just for schools and transportation, but also parks, that like quality open space and trails should be paired with housing. So that's, again, I don't know, quite the level of detail that we'll get into, but it's definitely something that will be in the comp plan to be paired with housing.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you. And if you all think of any other questions, feel free to email ac44@albemarle.org, and we're happy to hear your feedback and other questions.
Thank you for doing it.
Thanks.
All right, item C under new business, homeless intervention in Charlottesville. Tom Williams with us today. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Antoine Williams, the Housing Program Manager with the City of Charlottesville. I have the pleasure of have joined you since was in May. So I'm relatively new with the city. Today I'll be highlighting some of the homeless intervention underway within context of actions taken by city staff. I'll discuss that in sort of 2 frameworks. One, from a brief overview of actions undertaken connected to the city manager's strategy that was publicized, I think, early October. And then also I'll footnote a few aspects and elements of the affordable housing plan that of the city that highlights homelessness and housing insecurity and sort of the attention it gives. With respects to the strategy publicized by the city manager, what has taken place in connection to that is that he's gathered approximately 15 members of staff across 12 offices and departments in the city. This work group has convened probably in full at least twice that I've participated in. Our discussions have taken place in sort of 3 buckets. There's a first discussion in terms of immediate focus and action, discussion around midterm actions and long-term actions and interventions. For example, attention given to 24/7 daily shelter operations and programs, the need for permanent supportive housing, and the continuum of care. But with regards to the housing intervention, when the city manager announced it, I think he announced it alongside his work plan, which was framed by strategic outcome areas of the strategic framework for the plan, which was, I think, about 9 focus areas. So, and housing being one of those. We had a discussion about sort of immediate action around Market Street Park and resources that staff needed to respond to for the city manager to allocate resources for appropriate action as that relates. And then we also talked about service provider support. And we mentioned within that, we underlined the importance of supporting existing service providers, programs like our HOPS program, funding opportunity was discussed at length from my section. And then we also discussed our CAF, our Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund, and how that might support long-range solutions. We moved on there and closed out those discussions, those two meetings with some brief topics as it related to regional collaboration. And that was discussed in the framework of understanding our approach. We talked about it being a people-first, data-driven, community-centered approach, and optimizing that to leverage resources across spaces. So right now we're in a fact-finding kind of position within internally. So it's all an internal effort right now. Additional developments may be announced. This group has yet to report out, so I would say stay tuned to that. And before I go, just to highlight sort of where this is a important focus in the affordable housing plan. It is acknowledged as a priority focus for our housing advisory committee, which you have two members, throw you guys out there, Councilperson Payne and Sunshine, who's actually vice chair of the committee. Within our plan, it acknowledges an attention and funding focus needed for mechanisms for tenant rights, specifically as it relates to access to counsel to balance tenant and landlord conversations to hopefully mitigate evictions, to keep folks from sliding in from housing insecurity into homelessness. So the plan talks about that to some extent. It also talks about an expansion of our supplemental rental assistance program, which the HAC was instrumental in developing that program, where that program specifically allocates about 15 of those vouchers must be allocated towards individuals or households experiencing homelessness. We talked about the plan highlights maybe a need for expansion of a more robust tenant-based voucher program. Feel like I'm leaving some things out. I'll pause there, take any questions, but in a very high level, that's where we are with regards to staff action. And happy to be of service and connect with you all after today. If there's further follow-up that is needed for myself and my department, which is the Office of Community Solutions, or anything I can forward along to the executive team.
Let us, as a regional partnership, know at the appropriate time when you're just formulating your citywide approach, but let us know how we can interface constructively with you at the.
Yes, sir.
Because it clearly is the real reason for having the regional housing partnership with the regional spot. I'm looking at it somewhat concentrated. Not sure that we in the region can expect that the city is going to solve the homelessness on their own. So please reach out at the appropriate time to the partnership through staff, and we'd love to find a way to be.
Absolutely. I can tell you that time is coming. It's going to come. We will be reaching out at some point. I don't want to speak on behalf of the executive team by any means, but I can just sense by the conversations that have been had, we are getting closer to that point. So we're trying to make sure we have all the information we have need of internally to say what we're bringing to the table and how we could best leverage that and meet resources matching and efforts to collaborate effectively. So that's a lot. That's one of the reasons I acquiesce of why we're having this internal focus so intently. And then, but I do believe that time is coming soon for regional engagement.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. In my experience with affordable housing, especially as it relates to homelessness, there's kind of two types of homelessness, right? There's the chronic homeless and the situational homeless. And, a lot of times chronic homeless, it could be a mental issue. I mean, that's a tough one to solve. But, the situational homeless many times is, someone's just lost their job, or bad luck, or it's a health condition or something. I would look at, is there the ability to, especially with the situational homeless, is there a way to help with job training or something like that, where you link a somehow you link training so the situation doesn't happen again, because many times they just haven't had the opportunity. So somehow if the city, along with this group, along with the county, can focus a little bit more on the situational homeless, where there's an ability to help these people to get back up on their feet. So that I know many times we're looking for employees. If there's some way to train these people to get back up on their feet, you might think about it.
Very valued and great points. Those, they have come up, probably not stated in the same way, but they have come up in a lot of ways in the discussions we have so far. And to that extent, we know necessarily we're going to need the assistance of our community partners who are involved across the spectrum. You know, you pointed out accurately of there being sort of the chronic challenges and then the situational challenges, which sometimes, which in some elements, the affordable housing plan of the city kind of hits on that when it talks about sort of the outcomes of tenant issues where, you know, you end up, someone loses their job, they're not given a fair chance by the landlord to make right or make do, and they end up in court underrepresented. So those type of elements do come up a little bit in the context of what we've discussed already, but there's so many voices we haven't heard yet in respects to sort of those situational conditions, which we can only get more informed by being involved with the regional partners. So I know that discussion is happening, is going to happen soon, because we're getting to that place where we have just about gathered all as much information we can gather to support the work we need to do internally. And I think we'll be reaching out soon in the future. Yes, sir.
For those who aren't aware, I just wanted to provide a little bit of an update on the progress around Premier Circle and transition into a permanent supportive housing project. I think most people know that was a plan from the beginning when we acquired the Premier Circle site. The intention was to use it as a temporary emergency shelter during the peak of the COVID crisis, not knowing exactly how long it was going to last. And the intention was to transition a portion of it, the first phase of redevelopment, over to Virginia Supportive Housing, which is the statewide premier permanent supportive housing provider. You know, they're one of the best in the country. And they currently operate the crossings. This would be a second spot. The original intention was to have them start construction in May of this year. It did not happen. And the reason is because of cost escalations that every project across everywhere saw. And they had a major increase in their funding gap and have been working intensely to close that gap. They've gotten most of the way. There's I'm helping work with them. We have a gap remaining, but I think we see a pathway to getting that closed as quickly as we can so that they can start construction this coming May. So the goal is to, and that's, even if we close the gap today, that's still sort of the soonest it can happen, in part because there are a few other moving pieces that need to line up to get to that May start time. Vouchers, etc. There are multiple factors, but everything, we're working very, very hard to get them to a May start of construction date, roughly 16 to 18 months of construction, then they would open up after that. Just wanted to give a brief update there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir.
And just very quickly, I think in terms of city council's conversations, I think one area regionally there may be in opportunity in the midterm is thinking about, you know, one of the things we discussed is the need to build a permanent year-round homeless shelter. And if there are any, the first step would be identifying, are there any adequate locations or sites where that even may be possible? And that may be something that, you know, the opportunity that pops up is maybe it's not even technically within Charlottesville city limits. So I think that may be an area where some collaboration is needed. As mentioned, was pointed out, I think the Premier Circle project has been a very positive example of regional collaboration in terms of Charlottesville and Alcohol, both investing in it and making it a priority. So I think it's a good basis for kind of growing the partnership in that area.
Yeah, to reinforce that just quickly, both the county and the city have investment dollars in supporting Virginia Supportive Housing project as well. So it is mutual.
We are running up on our end time, so we're going to get into lightning rounds here. So the next, I don't want to, I mean, this is good content, so I don't want to change that, but the next couple of items, if we can do the quick version. We'll get into a lightning roundtable. There's no other actions that need to be taken today, so if you possibly at 3:30, understood. Ruth, you have an introduction and an update today.
Yes, so we have an AmeriCorps visitor serving with us this year. Her name is David Bell. She's over here. I wanted to introduce you all to her today and give her an opportunity to talk about what she's working on. Just so you know, she has about 5 years of experience in residential lending, and she's working on her master's in data analytics and policy at Johns Hopkins. Her goal this year working with us is to develop affordable housing tools for the region and communication strategies for the RHP. So she's directly supporting the work that we are doing. Anything? Yes.
Just to zoom through it, communication strategies are top of mind at the moment. So hopefully everyone received the quarterly newsletter in October. If not, please let me know. So we'll get you on that list. That was the very first piece. Going to go forward, adding useful content, things like consolidations of articles and information related to relevant topics. One of the ones that we're actually looking at right now is homelessness. So hopefully that will tie in and provide recent research, recent solutions, things that would be useful to know. Small case studies exploring the use of various grants and sources of funding, seeing how organizations are actually finding success with these funding sources and hopefully inspiring other organizations to do the same. Overviews of studies recommended by the speakers for the upcoming lunch and learns. And I might steal from Laura Jean and just kind of fly through that real quick. But we have 3 lunch and learns lined up for 2024. One being in January 11th. That will be with Fiona Freemark of the Urban Institute and Jenna Davis, who is with PhD candidate at the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation at Columbia University. That will be a Q&A panel on upzoning and affordable housing. Save the date will be coming with a registration link to follow. Just in time for Valentine's Day, February 14th. That's going to be Eric Mai from Housing Forward talking about Virginia Zoning Atlas. They just launched the Hampton Roads portion, and then he's going to come and talk about their success with that, as well as local coordination of what it would take to finish that Charlottesville portion. March 13th, that's going to be Nina Jacob and her team from Preservation of Affordable Housing. And they specialize in preservation of existing affordable housing that is at risk of being lost due to market pressures or physical deterioration. So all of these dates will be sent, save the dates, registration links, but just so you kind of hear it first, know what's coming. Now I will shoot it over to Jean.
So I just wanted to let everybody know, Lori Jean, I wanted to let everybody know that we are working with the Virginia Center for Housing Research at Virginia Tech on developing a proposal that would be funded by Virginia Housing to do our next, what we do every 5 years, the in-depth needs assessment of housing in our region. So that would be coming out in 2025. It's going to cover a lot of different in-depth topics, hopefully even more in-depth than in the past. So if you're interested, please reach out if you have questions or items that you want to make sure are involved in it. We'll also be working with them to deliver training. And so they're inviting staff. I know Mark and a handful of people are already signed up, but if you or if other staff that you work with in an organization that would fit in the regional housing partnership, whether it's nonprofit, for-profit, governmental, are interested in participating and helping gather and analyze some of the data, they're going to be providing training that anybody can join in on. You don't have to have a PhD in data analysis to be able to work on it. And part of the goal of the folks at Virginia Tech is that they would have people all around Virginia who can help with these types of studies, because right now the people power is kind of limited. So if you're interested in that or know something, please reach out to me. And that should be getting started sometime in the next 6 months. Depending on some people that want to live on it.
The Virginia Housing Conference.
Yes, the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference is taking place next week in the Hampton Roads area. We have some staff going. Mr. Smith is going to be in attendance. And as I emailed, if anyone is interested in attending on behalf of the Regional Housing Partnership, please reach out to me.
Still time.
There is still time.
Very good. All right, we're going to hit our round table. Like I said, let's do the lightning version. So we have quick updates to do. I would like to start by just recognizing that we do have two members who won the re-election yesterday, so congratulations.
Thank you.
So we'll start with you, Mayor Snook, any updates or things
I
like?
was gonna defer to, I'm just the alternate here. I'm gonna. Yeah.
All right, see, we understand what light. All right. Sunshine.
I'll try to be quick, Friendship Court / Kindlewood Phase 1, the last building will be opening up, at the end of this month, the residents starting to move in that building, and completely filled up by spring, early spring. We will, aim to close on our Hickory Hope project, which is in the Southwood, 121 units in Southwood, we're hoping to close in the next 2 weeks. Which means we would start construction on that project shortly thereafter. And then Friendship Court / Kindlewood Phase 2 will start construction in the spring.
Great.
I don't really have anything going on, so it's deferring. I'm just sitting there.
Council Payne.
Quickly, zoning underway, hopefully finished by the end of the year, but that's the biggest thing, and lots of conversation around other ways to kind of limit displacement pressures in some specific areas. Budget season coming up, and I would anticipate some of the conversations may include funding to help fill that funding gap in your circle, as well as invest in other homelessness intervention strategies, beginning resident-led redevelopment at West Haven, our largest public housing site. And I hope as well, other ways to expand the community land trust all the way in Charlottesville, tied into purchase of land. So that's it.
Awesome, thank you. Greg?
Let me defer to the city to see if they share what zoning related issues are still in debate. Lots. That's the lightning round. For sure.
Quickly, commercial corridors was our main district of.
Thank you.
In residential custom home building world, we are seeing not pervasive, but incrementally, presence of trade partners needing work. That's likely a reflection of interest rates affecting velocity. It seems to be the goal. And my report is a relatively small percentage, but some of that.
We've got 124 units of affordable housing there in Savannah County under construction and where the new traffic circle is. Come along pretty well. Probably if we get lucky, maybe we can lease the end of the year. If not, it'll be in the winter months. We'll have it done by the summer. Another 200 units going up in Winchester, of which 20% are affordable. And to Christopher's point, the projects out into the spring look kind of iffy due to interest rate. It's making it tough.
Regional Transit.
Regional Transit, Elmore County has launched our new micro transit, micro cat, I should say, transit pilot. It is free right now. You know that Elmore is doing this through a grant from VRPT and Elmore County, because we met its matching funding. But that's why it's free right now. It is a pilot, so we're hoping that people will use it. If the areas right now are Pantops, you know, our Pantops area and 29 North, you can go between those areas using the service. It is an Uber-like service on demand, so it's not like a jaunt where you can say, I want to be picked up every Monday at 4 o'clock. You need to call and request. I think service is, I think the time frame is within an hour. Not that tall, I think, Christine, you can correct me if I'm wrong with that, but I think that's what it is.
Needed, but I thought it's like 15 to 30
I
minutes.
thought it was tighter.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, look it up, because I thought it was a long time to be honest. Having said that, but, was the wrap and say microcat is being the provider is an outside business called Via, not via, via. We're always looking for via via this committee, anyway, so via. They are already running a program like this in I think it's 6 other localities in Virginia. And I couldn't name them if my wife did, other than I remember Roanoke was one. And, so we're looking forward to it. It's launched now. And, it's app-based. So you download an app and you go on the app and schedule or tell them you need a pickup. There's also a phone number that people can call if they don't have access to the app. So, and I left out anything with Christine. And yeah. I forgot they have 6, I think it's 6 buses right now. I know they have been delayed on some of their bus deliveries, so they have a few more buses that are coming. They're anticipated in the very near future.
We have the CMs.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they're.
Yeah, well, they're starting with some that are not, though, remember, because they couldn't get them,
Oh.
so, yeah, but anyway, that's okay.
Mr. Smith.
Let me say that. So I want to give a quick shout out to William as a Fluvanna resident. I just want to underscore what they're about ready to do, the effect of this regional approach to housing affordability. There will be 125 units at 60% AMI. At 60% AMI, I'm going to say that again, 125 units at 60% AMI in my little county of Fluvanna. Thank you, William, for doing that.
Is that the entire project or just the affordable portion?
No, that's the whole apartment units of 125 at 60%.
I drove past it today and said, gee, I wonder what that is.
Are they for purchase?
No.
And the second thing is a suggestion for the non-member survey. I would encourage that we include a link to our website because the general public does not know what we do for a living. And the second thing is I would make sure we have a 2023 annual report. And I just read the 22 and that we've done some pretty awesome things in 2023 that people who want to join us should read. So, you know, as a sales guy in the room, we kind of want to know what we're selling. So let's go ahead and put a link in that. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Mr. Holmes.
I heard a couple references to interest rates already, but we wouldn't do that every day. One of the things that resonated with me that I heard today was the goal of people who work here being able to live here. Of course, that's where we advocate for our membership in that way. And the thing we recently launched was our Hometown Heroes mortgage program, which provides favorable mortgage terms to occupations such as first responders, teachers, etc. And some very favorable results there. One of our core tenets is financial wellness at the credit union, and of course housing affordability is the key pillar of that. So very encouraged by everything we've heard today, and hopefully should also to see some interest rate relief here in the next coming year.
You'll look at the concept.
You there?
We're almost out of time, but just a brief update on our affordable housing initiative. In partnership with our UVA Foundation. We're currently working through our development partner agreements. We may not know that preservation of affordable housing co-op has been selected for the Portland site, and PHA selected for Piedmont Housing. The name had no influence on us. So we're working on that. We're doing our due diligence specifically on the Piedmont site. It was a former plantation, so we want to make sure that all the archaeology was aligned, with development, which we're happy to report that we haven't found anything significant. At least in the development portion, so we hope to move pretty quickly. Not updated. It's 2024 qualified census tract site. Which now includes our Piedmont property. So I think that's going to be provide a little more flexibility as they develop their financing options for the site. And finally, Avalon County Planning Commission reviewed our rezoning request from North Fork, and at a meeting which was open to public comment, we were happy to report that the request has been greenlighted for review by the county supervisors. In the 2024, so we're looking at the third site. And then yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rutherford, any items to share?
Hold on, what did you say?
Any items to share as part of the lightning roundtable?
Gotcha. Yeah, it's kind of hard to hear a little bit on our end. Now, beyond that, I actually am in a personal item. I am going to be doing a showcase of my manufactured home community in Dillwyn, Buckingham. So if anybody wants to see a brand new one, feel free to holler at me. Would love to display it to anybody who wishes to be part of that. Tomorrow at 2, Virginia Housing will be there and a few other big entities. Beyond that, we as a board have been taking the topic of affordable housing pretty intensely as of recently. We have been getting a little bit more, not necessarily hostilities, but we've had some shakeups where some people getting elected are not quite too pro affordable housing and whatever other concerns they may have. Beyond that, I don't have much more to report on that.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mead?
Hi, everyone. No real updates from BDH. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew my role. My role is actually as the HIV and harm reduction program manager, but we actually oversee a program called HOPWA, which is housing opportunities for people who are living with HIV and AIDS. And so if it is someone that disclosed to you that they are having a housing need and they also have a diagnosis, please feel free to send them our way. But as far as any other updates, I do not have any. I'm just happy to hear all the wonderful things that are going on in our district.
Well, understood. Thank you. That's for action. So we can. Any updates? To the road. Any updates back there? Good group.
You're a great group back there.
I will say that we're out of our county. We're looking forward to the next step from the July 12 work session with the Regional Housing Partnership. It looks like that next is that been, I don't know if it's been publicly announced, but it's on our calendar, so I'm going to say it. Is that allowed?
It's your word.
It's my. Something like that. Monday, December 4th is when the Ruth will be reaching out, and Keith, I would imagine, to some folks to participate from that July 12th session for some open dialogue with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors on that afternoon. And then staff, legal, finance, the supervisors and the commissioners will all be meeting to post that conversation. And hopefully we'll be leaving that meeting with some decisions on developer incentives or game. So that's coming, it's happening. So thankful to all involved to make that happen, and to the Regional Housing Partnership for taking on the request from Albemarle to host the work session dialogue that was moderated by Keith this past summer. So thank you for that. All right. Thank you for your patience. We went a little bit past time today, but good content. I appreciate that. The next meeting will be, the executive committee will be meeting on January 24th, 2024. The whole partnership, we will not get back together until March 27th, 2024. And that, I believe, will be around our next, are we doing an annual this coming year? We do it every other year. Every other year. Actually, got to get off filter, so I didn't know that. I guess we had a pandemic. Well, we're not fighting that. Well, so with that, thank you again, and we will adjourn. Thank you.